Hey Brandon, it's Fred. As you wanted, I'm showing you my system that I built in the 90s and have been improving over the years. This one is built on Unistrut. Unistrut is a system where we use bolts, these little locks that go into the Unistrut system inside here, and then bolts are connected with washers to connect the various pieces together. So I'll show you the frame at first. You can see the top here is 21 inches across, and we have various components in here. So for example, it's 18 inches from side to side and 21 across. There's various frames here to help support it. Got this one here, this one here, and then we got two along the bottom that join things together. Coming up one side here, we have one frame that comes up to the top here, and then moving over we have another one that comes up right here for the sparge tank. This is a three-tiered system, or a two-tiered system. It used to be a three-tiered, but because it was a Unistrut we could change it to two-tiered. It actually can operate as a one-tier, but we like the convenience of once in a while sparging with gravity or using one of the two pumps that are on here. So having a look at the cross frame, one great big long cross frame with very little support along the way until underneath the boil tank. We got one connection here. Copper pipe connects the gas. It's connected here. Here's a interesting little piece here that just puts an angle iron here to put our burners underneath. This is the burner underneath the mash tun. Not used anymore. I don't use it at all. Instead what we do is we put, this is basically a pan for a hot water heater. We use that theme throughout for lids in some cases, and it's mainly to hold on the insulation. So we have lots of insulation on the outside. For convenience we use bungee cords to tie it all together, and we put a thermometer right about there. One thing I would change, modern systems do not weld all the way down to the bottom of the pots that we have here. This one is welded all the way down. I'd like to have it a little bit higher with some kind of siphoning action to pull it right off of the bottom as newer pots are done. So I'll come around the other side and show. So some of the measurements that we have. The sparge tank is about 25.5 inches across. Then the bottom, I'll do it from the inside here just so I can pull easier, comes across. Ends up being 74 inches along the bottom beam. This doesn't need a lot of support on it, but we do have some support in here. Cross pieces are here as well. Here's our burners, 100,000 BTU burners, connected to the pot. Connects in. Just check the height here we're using. 27 inches over here. And then if I look at the sparge tank, about 53 inches down to the bottom. I'm just stepping back a little bit. Here you can see side view coming up. So the tanks are twinned together with a patch cable, patch tubes going through a red regulator and then into copper connections. So here we go across copper connection T here so that we can go up one side, follow up here through a valve to our sparge tank burner. This is just an angle piece of unistrut. See the spring through the end, and they're rigged up in not the most stable way, and it comes into the sparge tank. Middle burner isn't used anymore because this is a Herm system. It's a Herm system in a matter that I haven't seen before, but it does exist throughout. So let's have a look at the water. Here we are connected up for bottling day. We put everything into our tank. It is a 32-gallon tank, very thin gauge, stainless steel. Just basically all the stainless steel I could find at the scrapyard. I got it really, really cheap. And this one is exactly 21 inches across and 24 inches deep. And see, once again, it comes right out of the bottom here. Usually I have a pressure fit piece of copper elbow in here. I don't have it pushed in here. And then this is just a pipe that we put on that will allow us to whirlpool. So we just have a marking as to where it should go. It's not exactly where it should be right now. Should move it over a little bit. This is how it's set up for brew day. Right there. Okay. Now, looking at our mash tun. Mash tun's very similar. It's got various hoses in it right now and some malts so that rats and mice don't come in here and get it. It's approximately the same size. I use a copper slot, basically stainless steel slots that are cut with a hacksaw every half inch, and to make a pattern that covers the entire bottom. This is it, all torn apart and cleaned. Later on we put the different pieces in. This is the most key piece. This is a pressure fit piece. Or that's not the actual one, it looks very similar to it, but I only pressure fit it into the bottom of the mash tun, into the hole, so that we can drain out. For our hoses, this is a sample of the hose. We use cam locks. We've tried different things for it. Caution on these things, they do not shut off automatically, so we have these clamps available. Put the clamps down here where there's no heat. Also, we put our clean spray bottle with no rinse that's available for during the brew. And so you can see various places that we hook up to put some things in. If you recall, we used to, out of here, have a sight gauge on here. We removed it in the last brew because we actually had a bit of a problem with our brew tank, and we decided to use a sparge tank for a boil tank. That has been repaired since then, but normally we have a piece here with a sight gauge on here, And the sight gauge is the main place that you put your measurements in. That'll tell you how many gallons you're putting into the system. Okay, so how does things hook up? Well, one of the more complicated ways of doing things is what happens when we're actually mashing. So when we mash, we come out of the mash tun. So we have a temperature gauge here. We have two temperature gauges at the top. One is on the hose that feeds in, and one is actually in the top of the mash, and there are electronic gauges. But it comes out of here into the pump. Now these pumps, one thing I would do differently with the design is mount them a little bit lower, because the drop from here to here is not so much, and these are not self-priming pumps, as are all food grade pumps. You need to prime them, and it's much easier if they're mounted a little bit lower than this. But because this is all unistrut, it's very easy for us to do. We just have to loosen the bolts sometime and put it in. We have mounted on these unistrut plates here that are just connected into here on a piece of wood, and then the two pumps are connected here. Electrically, they come into a switch. I'll show the back of the switch. Of course, we safeguard on here with a no-fault breaker, and here they come into this, and then this goes to the electrical outlet. So while we're back here, I want to show you the heart of the system. Contains a heat exchanger here. So normally with a heat exchanger, what we have is wort comes out into here. As water comes the opposite direction, cold water going this direction as wort goes this direction to cool it. But we also use that for heating. So what we do with the mash, so we start with the mash coming out of here into the pump, out of this pump, and then into the mash tun until it runs clear. Then what we do is we change it, clamp it up, comes into this pump, out of this pump, into the top of the heat exchanger, out of here, then back into the mash tun. In the meanwhile, we have hot water in the hot liquor tank, comes out into the second pump, out this pump, and reverse direction here, and back into the hot liquor tank. So what does it allow us to do? Well, once they're all clear, we can control we set this to medium flow for the mash tun, and then we can adjust this for the temperature, which is controlled, which we can watch the temperature coming out of the Herm system. So this is a heat exchanger Herm system. Everybody says don't do it, you're going to clog everything up. No, not if you first clear your wort. Once it comes clear, it's clearer than what comes out of the boil kettle, and you're going to have a very clean system. So that's kind of the basics here. I'll ask you if you want anything else for this, then I'll pass that over to you, and but let this be a start for the design for your system. Bye.